Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Representative Ken Buck, member of the House Judiciary Committee, member of the House Freedom Caucus, had a very bad day yesterday where he went on MSNBC and inexplicably claimed to not know anything about the basic stuff on dealing with the impeachment. And it's inexplicable because Ken Buck's a former prosecutor. He actually wrote a book called Drain the Swamp. And it's how Washington corruption is worse than you think. Well, Representative Buck, if you're sitting in the middle of the House Judiciary Committee, one of three committees that's actually investigating the corruption of the Biden administration and the selling of favors by Joe Biden and his family to oligarchs around the world, you're sitting in the House Judiciary Committee and you're unaware of the basic evidentiary proof that's been offered discovered by the committees over the last 3 months or 6 months. What are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, I'm just going to play this for you. It's outrageous.
All right, let's talk now about the other lingering issue that you guys are going to have to deal with when you come back next week, and that is the possibility of an impeachment inquiry. Your Republican colleague, Matt Gaetz, says that if Speaker McCarthy doesn't pursue impeachment, he could be out of a job. Do you agree with him there? Where does impeachment stand from your perspective?
Well, we have three committees right now that are investigating Hunter Biden as well as Joe Biden's actions. And those three committees are the Ways and Means Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Oversight Committee. And they're doing a great job. They have issued hundreds of subpoenas. They have interviewed hundreds of witnesses, reviewed thousands and thousands of documents. I don't see any reason to start an impeachment inquiry at this point in time when all the power, all the resources that we can muster are now being used to investigate whether Joe Biden received money from Hunter Biden or Hunter Biden's activities, or whether he in some way knew about Hunter Biden's activities. I have a feeling he did know about Hunter Biden's activities. I want to see direct evidence of it, but then perform certain government acts, firing a prosecutor in Ukraine or some other government act, and knew that his son was going to be getting more money as a result of that. If we see that kind of a connection, then I think an impeachment inquiry is appropriate, and we can develop the evidence to move on to an impeachment if it's there.
So, but to be clear, sir, at this point, you don't think that evidence has been presented. You're still waiting to see that evidence.
I do not think that evidence has been presented, and I don't think there's a need to have an impeachment inquiry when we have three committees that are doing great work developing the kind of evidence that would lead to an impeachment inquiry.
Okay, very good.
What is he talking about? I mean, it's unbelievable. This guy, I hate to say it, but he knows certain facts, okay? He's not a dumb guy. He knows certain facts. One fact he knows is that the mechanics of House impeachment investigations, this is from the Congressional Research Service. He sat on the House Judiciary Committee through 2 impeachment inquiries of Donald Trump. So he's well aware of the additional power that it goes with opening up an official impeachment inquiry. Let me just read you from, this is the Congressional Research Service. It is the definitive place to go to find out what the rules are, why these things matter. So I'm just going to give it to you straight. Authorizing resolution, starting in the middle of this, I'm going to make it a little bigger, but this is about impeachment inquiries, okay? So I'm going to start right here. Authorizing resolutions also provide a means for the House to both direct the scope of an impeachment inquiry and, if desired, provide the investigating committee with additional tools, not just the ones they're using now, additional tools to enable a thorough and expeditious investigation. While House rules already provide standing committees with several compulsory mechanisms to gather information, authorizing resolutions for impeachment inquiries have generally conferred additional investigatory tools to a committee, such as the authority to compel responses to interrogatories. Representative Buck, you know this. You're a smart guy. You know this. But since you apparently aren't aware of the evidence that has been turned up by the committees who you are so proud of to date, that evidence in and of itself is enough to open up an impeachment inquiry in order to bust loose the remaining documents that are being stonewalled from the committees, from the House being able to obtain them. Okay, so let's just look at the evidence we have right now. I'm going to start with Devin Archer's testimony. Devin Archer, as you remember, was the partner of Hunter Biden. He's asked, very specifically, that he says, what did Hunter Biden do after he was given that request? Hold on. Yes, it was a high pressure environment, and there was constant requests for help. Okay, he's asked by a member of Congress, what did Hunter Biden do after giving that request? Now, this was talking about a meeting that was occurring in around Christmas between the representatives. Burisma is a Burisma board meeting, the natural gas company that Hunter Biden and Devin Archer were both members of the board of directors. So it's a Burisma natural gas board meeting. So he got a high pressure environment. There were constant requests for help. What did Hunter Biden do after he was given that request? Is at that meeting. Listen, I did not hear this phone call, but he called his dad. Okay, so he called his dad. How do you know that? Because I think Vadim told me that was there are two officials with Burisma who went with Hunter Biden to do this call. One was a COO, Vadim, and I can't pronounce his name, and the other one was the CEO of the company. Told him, because I think Vadim told me. But again, it's unclear. I just know that there was a call that happened there, and I was not privy to it. What did Vadim tell you about the call? Just that we called DC, but he didn't. Again, it's not like, okay, he bumbles around. I was not on the side of the equation, kind of working in the lobby side of the business. Okay, when Vadim told you this, I was, basically we drove back to the hotel I was staying at. Who's we? Me, Vadim, and Mikola. Mikola is the CEO of the company. Was it during that time, drive back, that Vadim told you Hunter Biden had called VP Biden at the time? It would have been at some point there or after, maybe the next day. Again, we spent, on a board trip where you travel with people from all over the world. We spent 3 days together. So I can't exactly say the exact time, but that was what happened. So you've got somebody who was there on the board talking to the CEO and another top official, Burisma, saying they called that Hunter and those two went into a separate room and called his dad, called DC, called Joe. So this was a follow-up to a question by Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan asked Devin Archer. The request was help from. So what was this request? What was the pressure about? Okay. Well, I'll just read you what Archer said. Archer says the request, basically the request is like, can DC help? But there were not, there were not. It wasn't like, weren't specific, can the big guy help? It was always this amorphous, can we get help in DC? Well, they said, can we get help in DC? Mr. Jordan says, the request was help from the U.S. government to deal with the pressure they were under from their prosecutor, and that entailed the freezing of assets at the London Bank and other things that were going on in Ukraine. Archer, correct. Okay, he says that's correct. So the phone call, the pressure was to get the U.S. government to deal with the prosecutor. Okay, that's what the pressure was. Devin Archer says correct. A few days after this meeting, here's what happens. I'm going to just play, and this is just so important to watch. This is Joe Biden a few days later speaking to the Ukrainian parliament. And I'm doing this because I'm going to send this over to Ken Buck. I'm going to ask him to watch it, so maybe he can get caught up on what the heck's going on in this town and in this world.
But in addition, we also have a battle, a historic battle against corruption. Ukraine cannot afford for the people to lose hope again. The only thing worse than having no hope at all is having hopes rise and see them dashed repeatedly on the shores of corruption. And if the people resign themselves to exploitation and corruption for fear of losing whatever little they have left, that would be the death knell for Ukrainian democracy. We've taken so many critical steps already, but all of you know there's more to do to finish this race. Not enough has been done yet. As the Prime Minister and the President heard me often say, I never tell another man or another nation or another woman what's in their interest. But I can tell you, you cannot name me a single democracy in the world where the cancer of corruption is prevalent. You cannot name me one. They are thoroughly inconsistent. And it's not enough to set up a new anti-corruption bureau and establish a special prosecutor fighting corruption. The Office of the General Prosecutor desperately needs reform. The judiciary should be overhauled. The energy sector needs to be competitive, ruled by market principles, not sweetheart deals. It's not enough to push through laws to increase transparency with regard to official sources of income. Senior elected officials have to remove all conflicts between their business interests and their government responsibilities.
Okay. Now, I think if anybody was looking at that speech, knowing that it occurred 3 days after Hunter Biden got on the phone with his dad, with two Burisma executives, demanding that the special prosecutor, that he be fired, that pressure get put on to put the special to force him to lay off of Burisma. And 3 days later, Joe Biden shows up to Kiev and gives a speech. Seems to me pretty direct, pretty quid pro quo. But then, just in case you need some more evidence, Representative Buck, here's a readout of the Vice President Biden's call with the President of Ukraine following the appointment of a new prosecutor general. And I'm just going to read this. This is a readout, this is official summary of that call between Vice President Biden and this world leader, Petro Poroshenko. The Vice President spoke today with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. The Vice President welcomed the appointment of a new prosecutor general. So this is Joe Biden saying, boy, I'm glad, thanks for doing what I told you to do. Welcome the appointment of a new prosecutor general as an important first step to bringing much needed reform to the office of the prosecutor general. The Vice President also committed legislative changes that will set up an independent office of the Inspector General and the Office of the Prosecutor General and allow prosecutions to begin against Yanukovych or whoever your officials, basically prosecuting the enemy, prosecuting the Poroshenko's predecessor in office. Sound familiar? The Vice President informed President Poroshenko that the United States was prepared to move forward with the signing of the third $1 billion loan guarantee agreement, which will support continued progress on Ukrainian reforms. Okay. And this one little readout, official readout, unbeknownst to the person who was typing it up, it shows he called Poroshenko specifically to tell him the following. Good job. You got rid of the guy who was bugging Burisma. Good job. And we're going to give you the $1 billion now. That's what it says. Now, we all know Joe Biden, bragged about it, but I know this gets repetitive, but I think this 90 seconds can't be, or 60 seconds can't be seen enough. So here we go.
I think the Donbass has potential to be able to be solved, but it takes two things. One of those things is missing now, and that is I'm desperately concerned about the backsliding on the part of Kyiv in terms of corruption. They made, I'll give you one concrete example. not but it just happened to be that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones, so I got Ukraine, and I remember going over convincing our team or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said, I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch.
So, for those of us who are keeping score, you now have the need for a special counsel and for a special impeachment inquiry is because it gives the House more power to enforce its subpoenas. It makes their subpoenas super subpoenas that cannot be denied under the court, under the law. 2, you have proof points where you have the then vice president speaking before the Ukrainian legislature, attacking the prosecutor general of Ukraine, attacking his office, saying more needs to be done. You have a testimony sworn, an actual person who's in the room saying Hunter Biden got on the phone with Burisma officials and talked to Joe Biden specifically about, and he said he couldn't say what he talked about, but said he called up Washington, and talked to him about their problems, and that their problem was they had this special prosecutor was in fact all in Burisma's business and needed to be reined in. So we know that was what that call was about, because that's what Devin Archer said the call was about. That was the impetus for making the call. So they didn't talk about, hey, how's the weather? It was, we have a problem and you need to deal with it. And 3 days later, Joe Biden gives his corruption speech in front of the Kiev, effectively the Ukrainian parliament. So then you have the readout from the official office vice president putting a direct link, a call from Vice President Biden to the president of Ukraine saying, thanks for getting rid of the guy, and here's the $1 billion. And then you have Joe Biden bragging about it. And if that isn't enough, then you have the witness statement of the prosecutor who was fired that was given, and he lays out why he got fired. And it was pretty straightforward. The circumstances of my dismissal were, I'm just going to make it a little larger here. The circumstances of my dismissal were that I tendered my resignation to the Rada at the request of President Poroshenko. Poroshenko asked me to resign due to pressure from the U.S. presidential administration. Okay? So we can read the whole thing, but Poroshenko asked me to resign due to pressure from the U.S. administration, in particular from Joe Biden, who was the U.S. vice president. Biden was threatening to withhold U.S. dollars $1 billion in subsidies to Ukraine until I was removed from office. We now have, so Shokin, who's the guy who gets fired, is saying Joe Biden was saying we're not going to give you the money. And I hate to say it, but I think we caught Joe Biden telling the truth before the Council of Foreign Relations. Maybe a rare instance in his life, but we caught him telling the truth. And there's the proof all around it. So, Representative Buck, the 3 committees have done a phenomenal job of getting us to where we are. Now we need to get all the financial records. We need to get the text messages from Joe Biden's secret 4 extra email names that he was sending texts to Hunter Biden and others around the world. We need to find out, we need to get those. Those are important to determining whether or not the House should vote for impeachment. And you're not going to get them from this administration. Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, I'm sure, told Larry Kudlow couple weeks ago exactly what needs to be done. And here it is.
And it really looks like there's two justice systems here. If the Biden administration continues to fight to withhold information that could really clear all this up, did they take bribes? Did they deal in the business? If they hold that up, we would have to move to an impeachment inquiry, which, you know, Larry, gives the apex of power to Congress when it comes to our subpoena power and others to get.
Okay, so it's not just me. It's not just the Congressional Research Service. Representative Buck, it is Kevin McCarthy saying they need it. If Joe Biden stonewalls, listen to him more.
The documents we need, the bank statements, the credit card statements, and others. Show us where the money went. Show us where you taking money from outside sources. And that would clear most of this up, but they seem to fight it every step of the way.
I guess a lot of people are worried that because of this special counsel, that will impede and indeed even instruct the investigation.
I'm going to just stop it there. The special counsels, the answer to that question, by the way, is it doesn't, because when you engage in, you put the power of the Congress, the Article 1 branch, it supersedes, when it comes to impeachment inquiry, supersedes the special counsel or anybody else. But I guess I'll let the rest of it play, because McCarthy sums up the evidence pretty strongly.
To obstruct the investigations of Jamie Comer on the Oversight Committee and the other committees, Judiciary and Ways and Means. Will an impeachment inquiry cut through that, Kevin, or is it not important? Or how do you see that particular set of issues? Because a lot of people are worried about it.
If they use this special counsel to say that they can't provide us the information, then it just shows more politics, and it will not stop us. Then we would move to impeachment inquiry, and we would be able to still get the documents that we need as we move forward. They confide us, and Larry, I've never seen an administration use different form of government like this to withhold information since the Nixon administration. This is appalling what they're doing. I've never seen a person in elected office use their office like this to have 20 shell companies. You have 9 people in the family getting paid after you take certain actions. I remember what has been allocated, or accused here is you've got a whistleblower that the FBI still pays that believes heavily in, way back years ago said that they are being bribed, the Biden family, but they never did anything with it, the FBI. You got IRS agents who's telling us they got treated differently, that the FBI actually warned Hunter Biden before they wanted to go meet with him. That here we have this Weiss, who is now the special counsel, literally let the statute of limitations run out on the most severe tax problems that the Biden family had. Did you not disclose $400,000 and now get away with it without paying taxes? Nobody else in America was allowed to do that. And they knowingly allowed that to happen. They warned their attorneys before they would enter to find the papers that he had storage at a storage unit. That's not how they treated President Trump and others. So why is this special treatment here? And why can't we get the documents to prove that you're not being bribed, that you didn't get foreign money directly in, that you didn't talk to your son? But what we found now is the things that then Vice President Biden, running for president, told the American public is not true. And he's now had to change what he said. And now the big whistleblower action that we've now found too, he used pseudonames while he was vice president, where they CC'd Hunter Biden about discussions with Ukraine. At the same time, we've now learned that Hunter Biden was being pressured while he was on that oil and gas company, Burisma, about getting rid of that prosecutor. And you have then President Biden, in his own words, saying that he withheld $1 billion to get that individual fired.
So there you go. Kevin McCarthy knows the case. He understands what's going on. Let's just one of the challenges Kevin McCarthy has, and I think this is really important. This is why we've been pushing so hard to get everybody to contact your congressman and spread the word that we need to get this impeachment moving forward. Because Kevin McCarthy has to get 218 votes. Okay, he has to get a majority of the House of Representatives to vote for an impeachment inquiry. Okay, that's what he needs to have. If the standard that Ken Buck is setting up, if you prove to me that he's absolutely 100% guilty with all the pieces together, I'll vote to have the ability to get that information. It's kind of backwards. You have everything before you. Ken Buck is a former prosecutor. Everything you have before you is enough to indict somebody for a crime. Ken Buck knows this. If Ken Buck isn't aware of the actual case, then he just has to look at this video, and we're going to send over a copy of the video. We're also going to send over an article written by Robert Romano yesterday that lays out the case again and rebuts some of the things Ken Buck said. So he knows this. But if he's not getting Ken Buck on an impeachment inquiry, the question is, are they even close to 218 on this? And that's why every single person who's watching this needs to help us by going and doing, I'm sure it's in the chat, but going and clicking on going to getliberty.org, click on the Impeach Biden Now button, and send a message to your member of Congress, but also forward this short video to people so they can see the facts. It's not me just ranting, it's the facts are laid out there for you. And just do that, and you will be, and we need to make it so every member of Congress hears from their constituents, their bosses, in this last week before they come back to Washington, D.C., and they hear from them saying, you need to get off the stick on this impeachment inquiry and get the ball rolling. Kevin McCarthy himself stated that the Congress is being stonewalled on a wide variety of data, ranging from the mysterious emails from pseudonym email accounts to bank records. And it needs to be, those things need to be had. The fact that Ken Buck said directly to the Meet the Press guy or to the MSNBC reporter or talking head or shill, he said, no, he hadn't seen enough evidence, is incredible. It's incredible. Now, later on in the interview, he kind of backtracks a little bit on that in terms of some of the evidence that exists. But that is a slap in the face of the job that's been done by Representative Comer at House Government Reform and Oversight Committee. It's a slap in the face to his own chairman, Jim Jordan, at the House Judiciary Committee. It's a slap in the face to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and it's a slap in the face to the IRS whistleblowers. It's a slap in the face to the FBI whistleblowers. It's a slap in the face to any rational thought, because the case laid out in this video is irrefutable. And we're not even talking about money taken from the Ukrainians, from the Chinese, from the Romanians, from the Chinese, from a Moscow mayor's wife, the only oligarch, by the way, one of the few oligarchs that was excluded when Joe Biden put sanctions on Russian oligarchs based upon the invasion of Ukraine. The one who gave Hunter Biden money somehow didn't make it on the list. Imagine that. What a shocker. So all in all, the evidence is overwhelming that we have corruption at its highest level. And to just paraphrase President Joe Biden, then Vice President Joe Biden, speaking before the Ukrainian legislature, it is incompatible for a government that is run through corruption, that is built around corruption, that is incompatible with a democratic system. Not going to argue the Democrat versus Republican stuff, just understand that's what he said, okay? Well, for the guy who is engaged in wholesale corruption to make that statement is absurd, but he's not wrong. A government for sale is no longer a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The government is the government against the people. And the evidence is clear that Joe Biden has run a criminal enterprise, and he is the person who is the head of that criminal enterprise, and he is the product that criminal enterprise has been selling. You don't create shell corporations, 20 shell corporations through 13 banks if you're not doing something that you want to hide. This is a criminal enterprise being run by the person who's currently the president of the United States. It is dangerous for this country. Contact Congress, contact Congress, contact Congress. Tell them to get off their stick and impeach Joe Biden. Please share this. It's important. I'm going to go and just look at the comments and I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on the comments, but let's see here. McCarthy has to go speaker. His weakness part of the swamp, obviously. Mark, I think what McCarthy's doing, McCarthy laid out the case, and I've been critical of McCarthy for taking the last 5 weeks and not doing something in terms of impeachment inquiry during the 5-week August recess. But the fact is, if Ken Buck isn't voting for it, then they don't have the votes, and they don't have the votes because the people haven't told them what they want. So don't blame Kevin McCarthy. The worst thing that could happen is bring up an impeachment inquiry on the floor and fail. That negates all of it. And if a guy like Ken Buck is on left-wing media saying, "Oh no, I have no proof. I haven't seen any proof," well, they need to sit these guys down and lay it out to them and just provide them with the facts. And a guy who wrote Drain the Swamp, How Washington Corruption is Worse Than You Think, in 2013, guy who wrote that book, 10 years later, apparently can't see corruption when it's all around him. It's astonishing. Let's go and I like Ken Buck. I mean, the reason I'm so emphatic about this is because I really like Ken Buck. This frustrates the crap out of me. Okay, so let's look back. Here's Patricia Whitehouse or White Lindstedt. Payback move, not going to happen. Your actual crimes knit your fantasies. Okay, well, I'm not going to kafefe you because I know what you're trying to say. And I love The Summer of '69. It was a great song. Don Henley did a great job on it. But Patricia, you're wrong. If you paid attention to this video, you then know we laid out the crimes. It wasn't a lot of rhetoric. It was what actually happened in people's own voices. So you can take it or leave it. You can reject it and say, I don't care that there were crimes being committed. You can say that, but you can't just say, oh, none of the evidence laid out doesn't count, because it does. It does matter. I got it. You got rooting interests. Your rooting interests are different. But I'm sorry. You impeached Donald Trump over a phone call to Zelensky that was perfectly okay, and you claimed a quid pro quo, and you were willing to impeach Donald Trump over that, and yet we've laid out a stream of evidence from across multiple continents that show a clear case that in Ukraine there was a direct established fact. His son was a member of Burisma board. His son was put on the board to get pressure, get a pressure point in Washington, D.C., hence his father. His son was confronted saying, we got a problem with the prosecutor general. His son went into a room, contacted dad, and talked about it with 2 members of this board of directors. 3 days later, and specifically about the prosecutor general pressuring Burisma, according to testimony. Then, 3 days later, Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, speaks to the Parliament of Ukraine and attacks the prosecutor general. 3 days later, call and respond. Pretty quick turnaround. So 3 days later, Joe Biden attacks the prosecutor general. A couple months later, he calls up Poroshenko as vice president, and he says, "Thank you for getting rid of the prosecutor general, and now we're going to send you the $1 billion." 2017, he brags about that, which is why we knew about it. He brags about it on video in his own voice. I don't know what you need. Maybe that's not enough evidence, but the fact of the matter is that's a pretty direct line of evidence. And it's up to us to make certain that members of Congress actually understand what's at stake and understand that this is not one of those things that you got a few little, hints of trouble. This is a direct line of evidence that shows corruption at its highest level. And opening up an impeachment inquiry so you can get the contents of emails that are being hidden, and you can get the bank records which increase the ability to trace the money flows. Those are essential steps before you actually bring an impeachment vote to the floor. And you're not going to get it done unless you get an impeachment inquiry. So Representative Buck, vote for impeachment inquiry. It does increase power of the House to investigate. That there's a line of evidence here that points to corruption, and it's been dug up by the committees that you praised at the beginning of your statement. That committee process has worked. Now we need to get the special power to be able to finish the job and get to the bottom of exactly what happened. So with that, let's see what else we have here. And anywhere in this chat, if you want to do the chat, you can go and click on the links that are being provided for the take action. And I'm just going to, I'm Betsy, I'm going to pick up yours. That's going to make the American people very angry if the House doesn't start impeachment on Trump. Yeah, Betsy. You want to talk about doing, essentially creating a, if you want to suppress voter turnout, ignore the pattern of evidence and corruption and say, oh, there's nothing we can do after having, and there should never be a quid pro quo in terms of this. You impeached our guy, so we're impeaching your guy. That's wrong. And I think Kevin McCarthy has been very smart to slow the roll, and say, hey, wait a second, we need to make certain we've got a concrete case. They have a concrete case now. They need to finish the job. They need to get the impeachment inquiry, official impeachment inquiry voted, so they can get the final pieces of the case, the things that are still being stonewalled. They got a pretty damn strong case. And quite honestly, based on this case alone, without any additional information, you should vote for, any member of Congress should be able to vote for impeachment with absolutely clear eyes, and send it to the Senate and let the Senate decide in a trial whether Joe Biden's guilty or not. We know that'll be a political vote. We know he's not going to be found guilty. But what we also know is that if the House doesn't act to hold people accountable, then who will? And I'm going to leave it at that. I appreciate you all tuning in, and we will just please forward this so others see it. It's just frustrating as heck. And truthfully, I'd like to talk about draining the swamp in other ways and some other things that are happening here in DC. But truth be told, if they won't deal with this, I have little hope they'll deal with anything. So with that, thank you very, very much for hanging in there. We will be back tomorrow.